Hello, happy Sunday, everyone.
Hello.
I'm here with Max. Yay! It's always fun to do these with Max. So, we were talking earlier. We get into these really deep, high-level discussions about things.
Yes.
And in another video, I shared about what's happening right now on the planet and how the light is shining upon the shadow and it looks like chaos, but really it's just the light shining upon the shadow, and so we're seeing everything that was once hidden, and this is actually a good thing. Mm-hmm. So that video is on YouTube. You can watch that if you like. But we got into this discussion today about what's actually happening from this perspective where it's affecting us in the collective, and what we need to do to heal so that we can move forward. So I'd like to chat a little bit with you guys about that. Yeah.
So, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with how, like, the light and dark, or the unity and polarity, or what? Or...
Yeah, well, so I can share some examples of what I mean by this whole conversation. I know, I feel like I'm not giving a good foundation for this conversation, but...
So what was an example of something you feel that, because you said healing, what was something you feel discomfort around? So
there's some dissonance that is coming up for people as the shadows being revealed, as the dark is being revealed. And for me personally, I remember when I came out of Source and into more form, where I felt like I wasn't doing a good enough job because I was limited by form, where, in Source you're unlimited. And those patterns still play out for me today if I'm not, if I'm not aware, if I'm not careful. So that's this example of dissonance and how the shadow is serving us, actually, because it's showing us what we need to heal and where we need to heal.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay. So in unity consciousness, in oneness, the idea of what people share, acting as one, in one resonance, in one creation, is sort of following that pattern of the flower of life, right? Everyone's connected at their centers, all operates as one, and there's resonance and harmony, and it's heaven, right? So from that experience, that being sort of where souls began, exploring, this initial exploration of duality, coming from unity to duality, we just did the same thing that we knew how to navigate experience, right? We followed the same pattern, right? So the same sort of structure, each connected at their center, each creating. The issue with duality is that in that experience, each of us have individual creation resonances, right? So for myself, I want to create something different than this person, and this person wants to create something different than this other person. But we're all sharing a co-creation, we're all sharing the same space. So in that, in our, first coming into polarity, everyone's in full expansion, full power, all this light and energy and creation all at once in the shared space. And what happens is everything clashes, right? Because we're sharing, this finite space with these really powerful creations.
And that's what we're really seeing right now on the planet is the clash. All the things, all the creations that haven't worked in harmony.
So in that space, there is this dissonance of energy. When each is standing in this pure knowing and power, there's this dissonance that rattles your very essence.
Yeah.
And Susie experienced that very directly.
So I'll share a little bit about that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I as I share this, I just want to extend that you may be feeling the dissonance as well and not even realize that that's what you're feeling. You may be feeling rattled to your core and not realize that you're actually feeling the dissonance of all the clashing creations on the planet right now. And in the universe, too. It's not just a planetary thing. So,
well, and beyond the universe.
Sure. How far out do we want to go, right? So recently, Max shared something with me that was very much his truth, and I could very much feel that he was standing in his truth. It was totally like aligned for him, his truth, very solid, very grounded, and it wasn't my truth.
Yes.
and I in my truth was I probably wasn't as grounded with it as he was in his, because I'm an empath and I like feel all this stuff. So it, shakes me a little bit, but I felt to my core just rattled. That's a great word for it. It just like shook me. And it was because I felt so much dissonance, because my truth was very, very different than yours. Like opposite. So, you don't get much more dissonant than that, right?
Yeah.
And so it was like, okay, how do I support him in his truth and stay centered in my heart with my truth? It was very challenging. And it just brought to light, that's kind of what we're doing on the planet right now. Us as light workers, we're standing in our truth, what we know we're creating, what we know is possible.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, all around us, we see craziness and chaos and school shootings and, all the stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, am I really, creating what I think I'm creating? How is it possible for me to create something of light when all of this is happening around me?
So, now with that perspective, coming back to the earlier conversation, how this rattling of the very core of our essence, each of us, in that initial experience of everyone simultaneously in this full, powerful creation mode, rattled each other. And that was probably very, very traumatic. I mean, like, you think about how much in oneness there is connectedness and harmony with one another, and then to see what your creations have done to each other in that rattling of everyone's essence. And that's a very like, oh my goodness, what do we do? Right? And that's our job right now, to heal our cellular trauma. Yeah. From any time we played the shadow role, or any time we played the light role and were harmed by the shadow, either way, we need to heal all of that at the cellular level. Or we were rattled by the dissonance. or we were rattled by the dissonance coming from source, or coming from the shadow into the light, coming out of source and into form, or coming out of a dark universe into the light, and just being blasted with the light and the dissonance that created. So this stuff is, it may be playing out in your life now, and you may be seeing, those patterns show up in your life today, and the cause is likely, eons of time ago. So, how the dark is serving the light in this conversation. Yeah. So, in this space of, we've all come into polarity and we all have this dissonance going on and we're all rattled and it's like very traumatic, right? So, however many souls choose to play the role as a temporary solution was to constrict and suppress each other until there was only one or a few creating. And so there was some form of harmony and some form of order and structure. He's talking about the Cabal, just in case you're not aware of that. And so that gave, even though it was, an engagement that was uncomfortable and something that causes a lot of suffering, it was more manageable than that dissonance of being rattled, of being unable to function on, it gave at least some stability. And so in that temporary solution, they are serving the light, being that they're holding back this great mass pandemonium of creation until we can figure out how to do this harmoniously, right? So in a way, they are kind of waiting on us, right? They are the ones asking us for help. Whether, I don't know their perspective is if they still have that understanding.
At a
of
soul
knowing.
level, that's what's happening.
Right. And so that is how those two roles are dancing together. It's not truly light and dark. It's that within how things are structured, that is what is most stable and resonant until we can create something more harmonious and resonant.
Yeah.
Right. And so
everybody take a deep breath.
Yes.
This is really intense stuff. I know it's hard for some people to accept and allow that the beings playing the shadow role right now are actually serving us. Can we talk about that a little bit more, and how acceptance and allowance is not the same as complacency? It doesn't mean that we just let them do their thing and we just sit back and watch it all unfold. We have a role to actively play. What would you say to someone who is saying, really, you want us to accept and have gratitude for the cabal for what they're doing? How would you respond to that?
Well, to obviously this whole conversation, how we understand what that constriction and suppression is serving, right? Not only in showing how, what we don't want, what doesn't resonate, what is, in that, but also how to rise above these situations and still choose what is in integrity with our divinity, right? So in that way it serves, and also holding back this great amount of dissonance. Now, there is...
which gives us a sense of safety.
Right. So there is also, depending on your path and what you're choosing, there is sort of like this, how would you say, individuals that choose to go back to unity, right? So there's polarity, there's discomfort, there's mastery of letting all of that go, and then there's transition back to unity, right? And so that, looks like the process of letting go of, all these dense energies and transmuting all these things and such. And there are others that try to master polarity and manifest their visions and end up often doing it at the cost of others, right? So they're wielding the light and the dark because that is the encompassing energy in polarity, not just the light, not just the dark, right? To wield both. And that often ends up being convoluted and out of integrity with our wholeness in divinity, right? So that is another path that some choose, and then others try to isolate themselves from everything and simply build a bubble of only their own essence and resonance and light. And so these are sort of three different main paths that individuals choose to navigate from being in polarity. And what I'm, from my idea, my perspective is to navigate it a fourth way, a different way. And that's to actually change the structure, right? To change the structure of duality so that there are harmonious spaces for unity, harmonious spaces for the duality light and for the duality darkness, right? So the light in unity and then the light, so there's a distinction there. And so this restructuring would have the shadow at the surface serving as a buffer for those resonant spaces, right? So that they're not leaking into others' creations, right? So it's giving the shadow a harmonious role in duality to allow unity and resonance in each our own creations in expression and experience.
Do you guys have questions about what he's sharing? Because this is like, for the mind to wrap around this, it's like, wait, what?
So it's a form of blossoming the flower of life.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you referred to it
Yeah.
as. And so it's opening the center space of each portion of the flower.
Do you have those drawings handy by any chance?
Well, it's on, you shared it on
but
on your Facebook.
to show them now.
I don't know how to display images on this.
No, I thought maybe you had some drawings like.
Oh, I haven't printed any.
Okay,
No.
okay. So just a quick explanation. So the regular flower of life, and then he's drawn something where the space is open in between each connection point. And I call it the blooming flower of life because it's like it's opened up. And I feel like when I look at those images, I feel like the original flower of life has been holding the structure for us because we need some kind of structure as human beings, you know, being in form, being on this planet, being in density. We need this structure to kind of, you know, assist us and keep us safe and provide the structure for creation and all of that. And now we're at a point where we can start to evolve beyond that. Like we've come into more mastery. We don't necessarily need this intense structure to hold us.
Yes.
And this blooming flower of life, when I look at it, I can feel like this opening, this expansiveness, moving out of the original structure of the flower of life and into this evolved, expanded state. And it's pretty cool. I encourage you to, I'll try to find the pictures that Max has given me and post them in the comments after we're done with this video so you can look just at the differences and see what you feel from it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that movement in the geometry and the structure is essentially each letting go of that center, right? And so this transition of letting go of how each has been bound together at the center point, allowing it to spread apart and allowing it to unveil what has been hidden behind that center point.
Ooh.
Right? So it's a form of opening that door.
Yeah.
And so letting that true essence shine through that has been shut this whole time.
So the dark really serves us by showing us how to move back into unity.
Right. And there's lots of lessons about how to create and manifest and wield, energies of the light and dark, and how that is sort of the encompassing energy in this expression of duality, right? It's not just light, it's not just dark. But there's also the part of balance, which is what those who serve that unity consciousness are bringing to this. So it's not just about duality or not just about unity, but it's about bringing both together in harmony, right?
Yeah. And so how do we do that? Through acceptance.
Right.
Through finding the peace within ourselves. Through moving into our hearts instead of operating from our minds and our judgments.
Operating from all of ourselves.
Operating from all of ourselves.
Right.
Centered within our hearts. Let's say it that way.
So it's, aligning your ego desires with your heart desires, with your soul desires, with your intentions, with your focus, with your resonance, with your imagination, with your breath, all of it together. Not just one piece, not just the best, what you consider the best or the most delightful or this or that, but accepting all of your light and shadow and still choosing what is in integrity with yourself as divinity in that pure source state.
Yeah.
Right.
Once you accept the shadow within yourself, once you accept any darkness that you find within yourself, it's much easier to look out into the world and be in acceptance of, oh, Alex, we love you too. Be in acceptance of what you see and the chaos and, the disharmony that you see. Yeah. So that's really the place to start. And as we alluded to earlier, healing the dissonance within yourself. Because moving into unity is about accepting both the light and the dark, the shadow and the light, And if you're not okay with something shadowy, you can't transcend polarity. You can't move back into unity, back into source. And so that's what I feel like my personal work is. And then sharing with others how they can do that for themselves. And you guys, I talk about inner work all the time. If you've watched anything I've ever talked about before, I'm always mentioning inner work, because when you work on yourself, when you find those shadow aspects, when you embrace your light aspects, when you embrace all of it and do that inner work, healing your inner child, all of that is going to help you transcend polarity, transcend the duality, so that we can move back into unity. We can start co-creating in a harmonized way. Even if my creations aren't exactly matching up with yours, it's okay, because I accept myself, I accept you as you are, and that's where the unity happens.
Yeah, and it's allowing space. That comes back to opening all those harmonious spaces.
Yeah.
Right? And so, you know, we'll have moments where we come together and we share experience, and some of the things we may perceive and experience may be very different, right? And this is where it gets into, you know, oddities of linearity and fination, where what I, you know, externally experience may become very different than what you externally experience. Yeah. And that's just because that power of manifesting has gotten to that level where it becomes very physicalized, and it in order to remain harmonious, it has to have those separated spaces in those ways, right? So it may only be a portion of certain external physical things that we share experience with, such as, you know, the ground and, you know, maybe a house or a road or whatever, and then other objects in our experience may be different, right? And so that's sort of how it gets into this interesting dilation of physicality and how that harmony actually physicalizes, right?
So let's talk practically. You know, Max and I lived together. When we had the experience where I felt the dissonance, one of the things I did was I took physical space. And I said, you know, I can't talk about this with you right now. I need to just be in my own space with this. And that's what we did. And because he's accepting of me and I'm accepting of him and we give each other our freedom, it worked out beautifully. And then I was able to heal the dissonance and come back together. And it's all peachy keen. But that's something to consider in your everyday life when you are experiencing dissonance with the creation of others, to take space for yourself if you need it. Now, if you're someone that's like, has a really strong constitution and you're not quite as sensitive and you can like stay in the room with other people that are having different creations, that's awesome, that's beautiful, I bow to you. But if you're anything like me, who's super sensitive and you're like feeling all the distance from everyone, it's okay to take a little space and to have your, you know, cocoon yourself for a little bit until you figure out how to heal, you know, the dissonance that you feel within.
Now, did you want to share what we've been doing every day?
First, I want to extend an invitation to light workers, to you guys who are with us right now and watching this later, to really step into this work of accepting other light workers and their creations. Like, that's the place to start, because you and I both know we see light worker bashing happening all the time. It's true, and it's really disheartening for me because, and look, I'm not perfect, but I do practice this. When I notice someone, you know, someone I would consider a light worker and they are creating something different than I am, to like celebrate their creations and celebrate who they are and how they're doing it and not judge it. And that's, if we want to come into unity, if we want anything to change on this planet, you guys, it starts with us. We have to take responsibility for how we interact with others, how we judge them or not, how we accept them or not. That's where we need to start. You know, first starting with yourself and then playing with other and co-creating with other light workers. Yeah, and that, I mean, the main sort of venue for a lot of people with that is compassion,
right? So putting yourself in their perspective, having understanding of why they choose what they choose, and, you know, allowing them to be at choice, right? And so when you stand in that space of compassion, it's not about them being right or you being right or wrong, right? It's just understanding why they choose what they choose and understanding that it is their choice and that you choose what you choose, right? And so that gives a much more stable foundation to engaging with others that have different creations.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I can think of an example of another light worker who, you know, just totally can't agree with what I'm doing and sent me a message and told me this. And I was like, oh, okay, you know, you choose what you choose. And recently my guidance told me to give this person some money because they needed it. And I was like, okay, so I contacted them and got their PayPal and whatever. For me, that's an example of, you know, they don't like what I'm doing, but that doesn't matter. I see their heart and their intentions and that they're pure and true. And so if they need help as a fellow human and I was guided to help, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to like hold back from them because they don't like me, you know? So that's what I'm talking about, like these practical things, accepting each other and supporting each other, building each other up, however you feel called to do it. That's what needs to happen if we want to shift this thing. And we want to shift this thing, right? Yeah.
So, do you want to?
I think that's a different topic in a different video, but if your heart is feeling guided to share it, we can.
Oh, well, I just thought it was relevant because that's sort of how this all came up was
okay, sure, yeah.
Was standing in our truth, our knowing, and our creations, right? And so each day we've been sharing our truth, our knowing, and our creations, right? Yeah. Our creations of light. And in that, more and more, you know, choosing to be of authority of our own experience, right? That we are, you know, standing in that truth that we are divinity, right?
Yeah.
And as divinity, there's nothing, you know, there's nothing else to answer to but our own choices, right? And our choices as individuals, our choices as a collective, right? Because as divinity, that's all there is, right? And then we create, and then we come down into these experiences, and we experience this limited portions of what we've created, but it's still us, right? And so stepping back into that space of power and knowing that it is of choice, right? And choosing something different than what we experience here now, right? And so I've been choosing, you know, very resonant creations with my heart, my soul, my knowing, my choices, my alignment of energy, what I've been focused on. And Susie has been expressing hers, and they're different, right?
Very different.
But they have some similarities, some crossovers, right? And allowing that space for each to express and to stand in their power and to, as a human, reclaim that divinity of self, right?
Everybody take a deep breath. How does it feel to reclaim your divinity? How does it feel to create from your divinity? This whole conversation actually did come about because I felt some resistance as I started to go into what I was creating. You know, I have this $500 million, billion vision, and from my heart, it's structured a certain way, which excludes certain people or certain experiences. And if I'm about acceptance and inclusion, like I experienced a dissonance within myself of my own creation. What's so funny?
Because you're saying these words about acceptance and inclusion, and yet in some ways you're resisting.
I was doing it in myself.
Well, yeah, you're resisting the human condition of having a finite experience.
Yeah.
It's
I know,
it's ironic.
irony,
It's really
know.
ironic.
So I had to sit with it for a while and really be okay with, I have all this source energy flowing through and expressing through me, and here I am as a human in this limited form. And okay, how do I transcend that polarity? Yeah. So I had to do that this morning. That was fun.
Oh yeah, lots of acceptance going on.
Yeah. So let's wrap this up. So how does the dark serve?
How does the dark serve? It serves in holding a form of structure, of stability from this dissonance of these powerful creations until we replace it with something better, right? So it is serving that sort of structure until we replace it, right? And it will still play a role, but its role will be different.
And I do remember probably about a year ago now, Prime Creator did share how we were creating a new harmonized matrix where it would change our ability to co-create while there might be dissonance. I do remember that. So that's happening. That's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, woohoo!
So stand in your truth, stand in your knowing, stand in your divinity, create what resonates with your truest depth of self, and just know.
And any cellular trauma that comes up for you as you move through this, find your wholeness in it. Heal it.
And allow everyone to have their own space.
Yeah.
Allow.
Yeah.
And that means allowing yourself, too.
Yeah, that's the biggest one, isn't it?
Allowing yourself to have space and harmony in your own creations, not self-sacrificing, right?
Yeah.
Allowing others to have their creations, not judging, not having to reach at what they're doing, right? And just shine your light.
By the way, you guys, I don't know if you can see this with the lighting in here. It's kind of funky, but this is one of the pieces I made, one of the activator jewelry pieces. This is transmuting the shadow. There's little rose quartz on here for transmuting the shadow. So that is, I'm wearing it today, but it is available for sale. So if anyone wants it, it's $133, and you can go to susiebeiler.com/halo or susiebeiler.com/donate and let me know that it's yours. And 20% tithe will go to David Hopkins and the building of his ark. So.
Thanks.
Just wanted to share that in case this belongs with one of you guys. Much love, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for being with me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
And thank you for being with myself.
Oh. I thank myself being myself. That's right. No, there is something about gratitude of self in fullness of self and integrity of self, right? And so being aligned with all parts. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes we don't want to recognize ourselves because it's like, oh, I'm going to stay humble. And, you know, that's my thing anyway. I don't know. It's like, oh, I don't want to appear too, like, whatever. I just, you know.
Right. So that's
like, no, I love myself. Thank you, Susie,
which
for all that you do.
Back to this whole conversation.
I know.
Do not.
I'm still learning, you guys. I'm on the journey with you. Still learning.
Do not doubt. Do not let doubt dim your truth.
Yeah. Amen. Or your light. Don't let it dim your light. True. Shine as bright as you want. And if your shininess brings up my shadow, awesome. Then I get a chance to look at it.
Be willing to stand in your light even when the shadow is uncomfortable.
Yeah. Maxisms.
Good thing.
All right. Love you guys. Thanks for being with us. Mwah. See you next video.